So I've been really looking forward to having this conversation with you because you've been holding a lot of space in the Seeds Commons area, and I've been I feel like in a way I'm acting as a bottleneck because there's so much energy that for whatever reason wants to go through me, probably because my face is out there. And I want to make sure I'm not communicating false information. So several different organizations that have recorded these, and I want to keep sharing them with the commons, have approached to bring all their energy into Seeds. And I think the best way of doing that is for them to join the commons. So I'm trying to figure out a framework for communicating. What does it actually mean to join the commons? What is the common structure? How do we invite more energy into that, which there's a lot kind of on standby for doing that, and what model we have. So I wanted to explore that with you a little bit, also get an update of what you're seeing in Seeds and how you're seeing it emerge, because it's kind of a chaotic space right now. And it's, yeah, just about creating maps. So yeah, that was my main intention with you, and maybe I pass it to you and see what your intentions for this were.
Cool. Yeah, that sounds great. I think, there's a lot of questions in my head around that, and so being able just to share those and share my perspectives on either sides of those questions, I think could be fun, and we could get somewhere fruitful. I think, yeah, might want to hear a bit more about that bottleneck sensation in you, and learn, what I and others in the commons could be doing to make it explicit that it doesn't need to be that way, and kind of hear more about what's really energizing you. And I think you brought up that civics, the Regen Civics Incubator. Seems like you're putting a lot of energy there. So yeah, probably want to hear more about that, and maybe get a kind of multi-year perspective on where Seeds is at, from the journey it's been on, since you've been involved and pushing a lot of creative force this way. And different people use different sorts of cycles, to describe how complex systems move or organisms move, and so there's different frames for looking at that. But I have my own sense of things, but I'd be curious to hear how you've seen the changes over the years and where it's at now and where it might be soon. Yeah.
Okay, so I put those three down. So kind of all of your questions and thoughts about the commons. We can have a commons exploration, exploring that bottleneck sensation a little bit more. I'm feeling it for myself, but I imagine others are too. And it's just that we don't necessarily know how to act yet. We don't have a clear framework and structure and agreement for just taking action, which is the key foundation of how to self-organize. So I don't think that's there. And if it's not there for me, I don't think it's there for a lot of people. So I'm feeling into that and sensing that. In a multi-year timeline, I'd love that. And just a super quick response to that one. I did a call, and I'll share this recording with you, but it's someone they've been working in the French world. So we didn't find them yet, but they've been doing something similar from a financial point of view with trying to create a more stable currency that automatically reduces inequality over time and creates a more stable unit of account. So anyway, some of the stuff we've been doing in Seeds, they've been working for like the last 3 years. They have built their own web of trust and kind of exploring that. So I talked to one of the guys that was part of that ecosystem, and we went really deep. And then we talked about like the theory of change and what does that look like. And I think you would highly enjoy that. It's very philosophical, and I feel like you might like that. So I'll share that with you. And it's kind of the long version of kind of how I see this theory of change, from someone else who's been deeply in that space and considering it as well for a while. So I think that's an interesting one, but we could touch on it a little bit. So yeah, let's start off with common questions. You said you had a whole lot on your mind. That'd be great if we just kicked it off there.
Yeah. What I'm seeing as the principal challenge right now is, and I think you mentioned this too, there's all this energy that's floating around in the system, and new folks coming in as well, and a lot of kind of a relatively younger crowd as well that's coming in with a lot of creative energy that isn't quite sure where to apply that in the system. And I think right now the perhaps relatively silent kind of outward communication of the commons and the newness of it means that people don't exactly know how to interact with that. And there's this sense that, you got to be one of the DHOs to interact. And even that idea of what a DHO is, I think people have these perceptions of this kind of ideal DHO state, whether that comes from what they see Haifa able to do, or what they see on slide decks. But the very kind of simple truth of it is that, permitors or DHOTel applied to the commons by typing up a Google Doc and saying they were DHO, and that's them saying they're a DHO, and now they're in the commons, and it's really that easy. But there's this kind of barrier of perception.
Well, it wasn't easy. It still required a vote. That was pretty difficult.
Totally.
Yeah,
but the kind of activation energy that people might assume is required to become a DHO, I think is a bit of a barrier to entry for folks who may have something they want to contribute here to seeds and do it through the commons. And so that's one that I'm holding, is kind of the pros and cons of that in a way, right? Because it filters out probably a lot of noise, but blocks a lot of creative energy that could be coming in. And also the way that the commons was set up, it was really designed to be seeing DHOs as the involved actors, with representatives from each DHO in voting roles and in decision-making roles. And that's a very particular design that says, okay, this is kind of going to be a coordination group or an organization of organizations, not anything other than that. And now there's this move towards working groups, and seeing the ways in which the current configuration of DHOs might not be able to address kind of the key priorities that are here right now in seeds. Some people feel like they can, some people feel like they can't. And there's this move to kind of get outside of DHOs and into working groups as a way to make progress. And so the very structure of the commons is kind of being questioned in that move. And I think it's always good to question these structures, because it was just kind of pre-designed, and we were kind of invited to step into it by Arena and Anna and Mark, who built that for the system, and said, hey, we think this will be a good starting point. Come in and modify this as you need to, but to start this thing, this is what we think is best. So I think we're at an interesting point there of not knowing if the kind of DHO only model is what's going to work best for a group that's trying to, quote, steward the health of the seeds ecosystem. So yeah, I'd say, one theme of questions is around that accessibility. Another is around the particular structure of it. And then, yeah, I think. Well,
maybe I could respond to that real quick. And I'll just share a story, and that's all this is, and it's probably false, on how I've seen it so far, and actually what I think the commons could do, and what I think is simple next steps. I'll just kind of go through that whole thing, and then we could see where we align and maybe where we don't, and what could we improve on. So at the start of all this, a group of people got together to build seeds. Then we need to organize ourselves, and we called it Haifa. But the original idea of Haifa was that it was going to be the open operational system for all of seeds. That's how I envisioned it. That's what I wanted it to be at the beginning. But we quickly learned that was a naive expectation, because each organ needs its own boundaries. And that's what Haifa ended up being. It had its own culture and its own flavor and its own way it wanted to approach the world. And it wasn't able to be diverse enough to be the whole thing. And in hindsight, that actually makes sense. If seeds is a body, the whole thing isn't run by the mind. Some people might think that's the case, but it's not the case. Every organ has its own intelligence and its own culture and its own, et cetera, et cetera. So that's what we learned, is that Haifa was inadequate for holding that space and role. And I think that was the move towards the commons. Now, I don't think the commons should be doing any, and these are all my opinions that I'm forming right now, and whatever, it's just opinions. I don't think the commons should be doing work. I think the commons is coordinating work done in all the organs, i.e. the DHOs that make up seeds. So let me show the map of this real quick. So this is our knowledge base I've been working on. I think it helps elaborate this so well. So we're doing working groups in the seeds commons. I don't think any of the working groups are anything other than groups of people coming together to discuss ideas. None of that, in my opinion, should be paid. All of those roles should be, I'm saying a lot of shoulds. Let me try this again. How I'm seeing it right now is that it could be. That all the roles are part of different organs within the seeds ecosystem. So for example, Renaissance Explorers, how I kind of saw this is what's doing the the knowledge evolution of seeds itself. So if we're doing upgrading our seeds currency protocols or upgrading our governance protocols, whatever that is, that could exist in Renaissance Explorers itself. So it's not a working group within the seeds commons that the commons is paying. Renaissance Explorers are paying it. And maybe representatives from different spaces find value in being part of that exploration. So they join the working group, but they're joining it from a role within Samara, or DHOs, or Permators, and those organizations are paying them for that time and effort, if that makes sense. So I see the commons being the coordination mechanism, not the operations, and all the operations and actual work happening in all the different organs that make up the seeds ecosystem. And what I was even seeing is that the commons budget itself, we eventually pass that over to the seed citizens once we have the tools for it. So again, how I see it is all these organizations send 2 representatives to be part of the commons. And then it's those individuals that come together to vote on what the commons budget is. So how much of the budget each one of these groups get. So it is kind of centralized at the beginning. Once we build out all the tooling and we feel like it's a good transition, or maybe we don't even end up doing this, the seed citizens are the ones actually all voting to do the budget. And then it's really just the commons, members then that are just doing working groups, coming and sharing information, updating everyone where they're at within each individual organ. If the commons is doing any effort to begin with, I think it's just running the regenerative roundtables. And I would hope that another DO will actually emerge. Maybe it's do tell or something to actually take over running the roundtables as well. But again, I don't want the commons doing any operations. I want the commons just coordinating and all the operations happening in all the different DOs. So then when people show up and they're like, cool, I love this, I want to contribute, you can come down and click on any one of the active DOs. So HIFA has done it. Then you get an idea of, okay, what is this organization doing? What are they, where are they serving seeds, and how do I join them? So how do I contribute to this DO? And then if every one of the commons organizations did this, then people who want to join this and they're like, yep, I love it, they can click on all of these different DOs, see what they're up to, how they can contribute to them. And then everyone's contributing through one of these DOs and organizations to the whole. Cool, so that's kind of how I saw it. I'll just pause there to see any reflections and feedback that you might have on this.
Yeah, I'm wondering if we could kind of run with this for a second, because as an ideal vision, I think I see this as well and hold it as well. And I wonder if we could kind of take the example of the currency working group right now and look at that in real time right now, how that's functioning and how that could move towards the sort of state you're talking about. And I can share more on that, which is there's this question, right, about how do we design the seeds currency or currencies to be most useful for folks and really accomplish what we want. And there's been a vision for one period of time. And then that vision kind of came into question a bit. And there's been this exploration period, lots of different ideas flourishing. And this group of people that I'd say mostly kind of situated in folks who have experience or roles in HIFA coming together to really try to put together clear thoughts on releasing a new brand of currency. And there's the whole referendum that narrowly didn't pass about creating a constant currency. But people really appreciated the idea of constant currency. I think there was just a lot of concern about doing that through referendum in that way. So there's all these ideas. There's this kind of energetic effort to address a key need in the seed system, which is a more clear currency model. And right now, from the commons perspective, it's kind of, at least I experience a lack of clarity as to how to have that work being organized. Because right now it's called a working group, but it's really HIFA. And so my thought is, well, how do we move towards a system where HIFA can more clearly articulate that maybe HIFA and Permators, if it's really those two groups working together on this, that HIFA and Permators are taking on a commitment through the commons to propose, an official 3-layered currency model that the commons is then going to decide on whether they're going to launch or not. But without the DHOs explicitly stating kind of their role in a way, or their scope of work, there's this confusing melding, because a lot of people are in different DHOs and a lot of people are interested in different activities at this early state. There's not a lot of clear kind of boundaries and borders there. And so the confusion is, when people are showing up to these commons meeting, are they showing up for their DHO, or are they showing up as their individual with their individual cares and concerns and their individual participation in a specific working group? And so there's a lot of overlapping there that I see that DHOs being able to propose clear kind of roles and accountabilities to the commons could help clarify some of that. And so, yeah, I'd love maybe some reflection on that from you. And
yeah, so let me get into this. How I would see this, and to simplify how we scale, and I'm always thinking of that, is all the work again is done in a do. So you said, okay, most of the working group, well, not even most, some, they're already in Haifa. I'm one of those. So I'll tell you my own concerns. I'm already getting compensated in Haifa for all the ways I'm showing up. So I just show up to that working group because I know it's valuable. It's part of the work I'm doing in Haifa. Awesome. I'd like that to be the case for everyone. So anyone else who's showing up to those working groups, they're representing and they're coming from another organization that's giving them value. If that organization doesn't exist yet, because one, they don't find the culture or whatever of these organizations that exist to be a good fit for them, then there's an opportunity for them to create a new organization. If they're all alone there, they probably won't create an organization and maybe it's just not a good fit. If they're not alone there, then a new organization can be born and they can bring to the commons. But then what I see is the commons is then paying Haifa, and then Haifa pays the working group, the members who are part of that working group. So then Haifa shows up at the regenerative roundtable and says, hey, we want to help make a new currency model. We're willing to put development resources and, design resources towards making this happen. And then if the commons or the citizens all vote, yep, we want Haifa in this next season, then people who committed to doing that show up in Haifa in those capacities to those working groups to make that work happen. And that could be across the board. Renaissance Explorer shows up to that same roundtable and is like, yep, we're also going to put resources towards creating this new currency model. And Smart Trust is like, yep, we're going to do it too, or whatever. So then the commons is like, cool, well, we've got $1,000, just super silly numbers here. We're going to give 300 to Haifa, 300 to Renaissance Explorers, 300 to Samara, and 100 for Open Quest or whatever. And that's how we're then going to pay for the work to make the currency working group actually happen. But then the commons is then doing it through these organizations. So what I didn't want is that the commons isn't responsible for due diligence necessarily. The citizens are responsible for that on who they vote in every season. And that happens through the roundtable where Haifa shows up and says, this is what we did last 3 months. This is the evidence of the money that we got paid. And this is what we did. This is what we want to do the next 3 months. The citizens are like, yep, we love it. We want to keep it going. And then they stay part of the commons or they don't. And then that's true for every organization. So then the commons itself, I wouldn't see having any roles necessarily. I think commons could have badges, which is what I'm exploring. And that's something that's, seeds ecosystem wide where you need some authority. So what I actually have up here is badge governed. Like the commons would have a badge and you have to have that badge in order to make edits to this guide. So we can then use the commons do itself to issue out badges and give authority throughout the ecosystem. But I don't think we should, fall into the commons itself being its own do, a do meaning something that's doing operations. It's taking a budget, it has a treasury, it has roles, it has quests, it's managing, people are putting up proposals to do quests, it's looking at those quests. And I think if we do that, we're going to end up with the commons trying to do what Haifa did originally, and that one failed. So that's why are we going to repeat that same, experiment? So that's kind of all of my current feedback. And what I think some next steps could be is we just start off with the first season. And this is what I've been recommending other groups who want to join the commons is next season, let's do the regular flow. The first day, we'll look at what we did up until that point. So there's a time for every one of the organizations within the Seeds Commons to show this is what we did the last season. And the second day, well, there's two things. So I'm doing a whole lot here, sorry. But here, actually, I'll take you where there's a space for this. As we come up to the season structure here, I actually have a little thing for the roundtable. It's super basic now because I wanted to keep it that way. So we can keep evolving it and I'm not too opinionated here. So everything here is a work in progress. Let's continue. But yeah, day one is a recap of two things. So I think each commons organization, they have two people. Awesome. One of those people talks about what they did. And they specifically like this is the OKRs, if we want to put it that way. And the other person talks about what they learned, which is also equally important. And this could be any part of their learning journey. Like, hey, we didn't accomplish anything because we actually learned a whole lot. Well, great. That's also an accomplishment. That's super valuable. So there's two different representations of what happened. So that's the first kind of day. The second day is then organizations who want to be part of the next season. I'll present what they're going to bring for the next season, all their ideas for the next 3 months. And this is what I'm currently talking to organizations with now and saying, yeah, you want to be part of it? Awesome. Prepare some value for the Seeds community. For example, I was talking with Tom of Maptio. If you're familiar with Maptio, it's like a way of mapping Hellenic organizations. So it's a really awesome tool. And he's like, so what I suggested with him, I'll share with you the video, is that he actually creates a map of the whole Seeds ecosystem. So I'm having him work with some people in Seeds right now to create that map. So you can see all the different organizations, the different teams, and all that fun stuff. And then bring that to the Regenerative Roundtable and say, hey, this is something I already did and really impress the citizens. And this is what I'd like to do going forward, is actually merge the mapping tools so that they're compatible with everything we're doing. And this is a chance for any organization who has a similar offering to the Seeds community to do that. And then the third day is the assembly. This is open dialogues about it, discussion, where we have a lot of working groups and talking about everything that happened in the previous 2 days, so that citizens can then decide and vote on which dues they want to be part of the commons. And this is how the citizens actually steer, because what organizations are active is what work's being done, and that's where we're headed. So this is how the citizens actually get to collectively steer where we're going. It's what groups are then being voted in to be part of the commons. So that was the general frame I saw, and I wanted, this is what I think we can do to simplify massively what the commons is trying to accomplish, is maybe we can focus our energy on just getting this first roundtable done right, and then running through it one time from here. So if the roundtable is on March 20th, that gives us about a month and some change to agree on our organization structure and prepare to run this roundtable and do it well, and then invite all the organizations to do this 3-step process and do that really well. And with voting it, and then kind of walk through what does that look like. And then again, the commons is coordinating, it has a budget, and it's just giving it to the different dues that were voted in order for them to move things forward. So the commons at the beginning will have a lot of power because it's those members who are part of the commons that are voting on how that budget is spent. The commons could say, actually, you know what, for whatever reason, we all choose to give 100% of the budget to Samara, because what they're doing is so incredibly valuable at this next season that that's just what we think is happening. And if all of the other organizations who are voting agree to that, then of course they can do that. Very likely every organization is going to have its needs, and that's how we're going to end up budgeting, is everyone's going to have to come together and figure out something that works for all of them. And that may or may not work. Well, we're going to find out. So that's kind of my opinions right now. I'll pause there and see what you think.
Yeah. I really appreciate that and see it as well, and really appreciate how you've been bringing seasons. So I'm excited.
Yeah.
I think, when you think about it for yourself, or you talk to other organizations, what do you see as the value proposition for being involved in the commons, beyond the chance to access funding that would come in through kind of a seed sale or outside fundraising, right? Because I don't think we should think of it as just being dependent on the sale of seeds to raise funds for the commons, but there's that opportunity with the Get Going grant that will be coming up here in a month as well, to really raise funding for a group that's experimenting with public goods. So that, there's multiple sources hopefully coming in, but for an organization that's maybe playing in the Seeds ecosystem and sees that some of their services are applicable, I'd be curious your take on kind of the pros and cons almost of going through the efforts to get voted in, to be a part of the system, to learn the system through the commons, for the hope of receiving some funding, when they might just be able to focus on their mission in a more direct way without going through that, what can be a bit of a bureaucratic process of putting together a proposal, getting people to vote on it, coming in, learning how to do the meeting structure. That all takes time. We've been doing this for about 3 months thus far in the commons, and I think we're just starting to get the way those meta agreements work under our belts a little bit to understand how we actually make decisions and how these rules function. So there's a lot of learning involved in there. And while I appreciate the cyclical, nature of the seasons and the ability to come in cleanly, there's also a lot of learning that requires to get that right into top gear. So yeah, curious how you're thinking about those trade-offs.
Yeah, a whole lot of different things. First, this is why I think we should heavily simplify what Seeds Commons is doing and make sure it's not doing any operations. Because if it starts, leaking into doing operations, the barrier to entry into Commons just gets way higher, because then you have to learn about the operational culture, and now you have to be paying attention to voting on proposals and roles and all that stuff. Like, I don't want that to be the case, because I think it'll just collapse. Instead, it's like, if you're part of the Commons, your real effort is just during that regenerative roundtable week, essentially, is you're preparing stuff for it, you're presenting it, you're participating in the conversation for the next season. And then right after the roundtable ends and the citizens vote on which dues, then they set up their representatives, and then they vote on a budget. And then that's pretty much it until the next roundtable. You could participate in working groups. There's some coordination stuff going on, but then that's all just optional if it helps you serve your individual dues purpose. So, HIFA would participate in those working groups if it's talking about building new technology and tools, because we've got to participate in that. But if it's talking about a new, marketing campaign or whatever that's run by another dude, maybe we don't participate in that, because that's not what we're doing this season, So then that's what I see the Seeds Commons being. It's just kind of a coordination hub, place for interchange of information, and then it's just kind of there holding space until the next season. So then that's kind of how I saw the Commons to reduce that barrier. And then working capital. You mentioned the Gitcoin grants, awesome. The sale of seeds, awesome. And yes, let's absolutely do that, and so much more things like that. But then also the seeds currency and some of the models for launching a constant currency, the Commons would be benefiting from that. So if someone puts in, €1 for a constant currency, this is a model I'm proposing, and we can earn 20% interest off that euro in some of the DeFi world with capital preserved, right? But maybe to offset inflation is only 7%. And that's what we're paying people out for the constant currency, which means the Commons has 13% extra for working capital. So if that model works too, that could provide also a lot of working capital for the Commons. So anyway, that's what I see as the primary drive, probably, if we're looking at, Maslow's hierarchy here. The primary base need is, hey, I can get access more working capital. The groups I'm talking to, their need is a little bit higher up in that pyramid for self-actualization and creating a regenerative civilization. So their purpose and their organization is to do that. And they actually see joining Seeds as a pathway to do that, opposed to a barrier to overcome. So learning the new governance and economic systems, participating in that, having a voice in it, that's all part of their mission anyway. So it's not like this is extra work outside of what they're doing, which I kind of see as the best fits for the Commons right now. It's the organizations who are already working on systems change and see joining Seeds as a more effective way to reach that goal. Rather than just something they need money and they have to put up with all this, extra stuff in order to get the capital. So that's kind of what I'm currently seeing. And if we can reduce the workload and expectation of what it means to be part of the Commons, I think that would be tremendous. And then their energy is what their due is offering. So again, a couple of the groups I've been talking to, I'll share the other one with you. He's similar to, what's he called? Evolute 6. So he's helping organizations build regenerative organizations, which I think is huge. That's something that Commons could be doing. I know Samara is working on that too. I actually think they're complementary lenses. So that could be a big value add to the Commons. His ad is all these new organizations setting up in our whole ecosystem. We're here to help them actually get set up. So it's kind of a meta service there. So it fully aligns with his need, because his organization's about helping other organizations set up regenerative organizations. So joining the Commons is perfect fit for him. So we could say, hey, you can get some operational capital, help set up organizations, and help move the ecosystem along, right? Same thing with Do Tell. They want to tell the story of the Renaissance. Well, it makes perfect sense for them to be embedded into Seeds, which is currently working on serving that. So I would really see that's probably what would make an organization, maybe I can't think of the word because it's not the right way of describing this. Okay, so I'd actually say this is probably why citizens would vote the organization into the Commons, is if they're a really good fit to begin with. So I actually don't see any organizations coming in that are just after capital and not really a really good fit for the ecosystem anyway, because then why are the citizens voting for them to begin with? So it's a lot of responses to that, and I'll pause there because give you a space to reflect.
that was super helpful. Could you maybe share a little bit about the vision for the regenerative civics incubator and how that kind of contrasts with the vision of Seeds Commons? Because I see that there's some kind of shared value there, but they're definitely distinct. And so,
yeah, I didn't even see any shared value. I see them as totally distinct.
Okay.
So let me give my map kind of from another lens. Is I see the Seeds Commons as being like what replaces the nation state budgeting process.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, let's use the US for example, like they're getting X billions of dollars in revenue for whatever reasons, maybe trillions, and they're setting up a budget. We're going to give 20% to the military or whatever. So this is what replaces that. Is instead we might have the nation state that's got $10 billion in working capital, and then every 3 months, all the organizations in that nation state that want to serve the common good can propose to join it. The citizens of that community say, yep, we love all these groups and organizations and what they're doing for the world. Let's fund them to do beautiful things. And then collectively, the citizens are deciding their budget. So that's the role I see for the commons, is kind of like what replaces the budgeting process of a nation state, and the coordination process. And really, this might replace the entire legislative, arm. Is this gets a little bit deeper, but never mind. I'm not going to go there. So where does the Regen Civics fit into this whole thing? Regen Civics is focused on regenerative civics projects. So that's one thing that could be funded in the commons. So the citizens every season, they get together, let's add it here, and they get to decide, all right, Do Tell is doing storytelling and marketing. Renaissance Explorers is upgrading our protocols and designing new economic systems. Movement of Movements is helping build the movement and support new people joining. Haikadu is building new technology, etc. So every season, the citizens get a look and say, all right, where do we put our value? Where do we put our budget? We love what Regen Civics is doing, setting up new regenerative civics projects. That's really valuable. Let's give them, 10%. We need tools and technology. That's really valuable. Let's give them 10%. Renaissance Explorers, etc. So you get to go through, and every organization kind of represents, an organ in the ecosystem. So Regen Civics, in my opinion, is an organ focused on setting up on the ground regenerative civics projects, kind of focusing more on land-based projects at the moment. Why the commons itself is the budgeting process for funding all of these things, and a coordination mechanism for setting up working groups across the organizations. So I see them as, entirely different. If what's a biological representation of this is, the commons itself is the heart. It sets the rhythm of the blood, and it helps circulate energy throughout the whole organism. Why each one of the commons do's is each one of the organs within the ecosystem. So the commons itself, from season to season, just like the body does, it says, oh, actually, we're trying to run. Let's put more energy and blood down to the legs right now. So we shift it down there, and all the organs that are, part of the legs and the muscles and the tissue down there, we divert energy towards that, which is what the commons has the ability to do. So the commons itself isn't the legs. It says, let's give more energy to the legs. Or we're doing a lot of thinking right now. Let's give more energy to the brain. Or we're doing a lot of feel, exactly. So that's kind of how I see the distinction. So anyway, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I hear that. I think what I was seeing is just the, when you speak about roundtables, there's what I hear is really the desire for the ability to inform citizens and then have citizens inform the commons. But I think what is also felt as a critical need amongst commons organizations already is a clear sense of what other DHOs are doing, and getting a more kind of day-to-day understanding of who's holding what, and so that they know how to move in relationship to that, rather than making assumptions or trying to do too much kind of collective operational decision making. Okay, we're all going to move this way together for the next month, which is never going to work in the decentralized environment. But kind of stating clear projects, missions, objectives, and being able to share those learnings out with other groups that are trying to look at what other groups are doing and learn from it, learn how to integrate with that, I think is part of what goes on in the commons as well. And I see that same sort of, learning, sharing occurring in that civics incubator. And so I think finding the appropriate spaces for that is critical for the commons.
Well, and maybe a new organization or do it self forms to serve that need, where because there is an active need to hold the spaces, invite people and do that, but maybe that falls under the Samara domain or movement of movements domain. Like I would say that falls under a different domain. And then the citizens are saying, yep, we find that valuable. Let's keep funding that organization. And I would say 80% of that coordination bulk happens at the roundtables. So it's the first day where they say, what did we do? That gives you a really good understanding of, okay, this is what the organization's actually doing. So if all the other organizations watch that and you're like, HIFA makes its presentation like, oh, okay, this is what HIFA is actually working on. I thought they're doing all this other stuff, but this is what they're actually doing. Cool. The next day is, this is what we're going to do. So this is where every organization makes it clear, this is what we are working on. So again, showing up and watching that, you're like, oh, okay, I thought HIFA might have been doing these things, is what they're actually doing. So, it might take a couple of those cycles for people to get really clear. But that's why I say 80% is. And then we can do the other 20% in extra working groups. But, ideally, this is all happening during the 3-day sessions, because otherwise it's just too much coordination cost and start breaking down. And it's okay if we have some overlap in critical areas. It's probably actually mandatory for us to be anti-fragile and resilient, is we might need some overlap in movement building and tools that we're building and all of that. If we're a decentralized organization and the passport goes down for voting, which it did, there's a bug that made it so you couldn't vote on the last referendums, but the wallet still worked for us to be able to vote. And there was a lot of debate early on when we were doing the wallet and the passport. People were like, no way, we shouldn't do the wallet. We just should focus on the passport. But, we ended up doing the wallet because we were decentralized. That's important because now we're anti-fragile. We have 2 different ways of accessing it, which is important. So I see that, organizations are going to have that overlap, and that's okay. And if that overlap exists, it's probably in the critical areas anyway, which is why there's overlap, because different groups want to focus on it. And that's probably also okay. But it could be not okay, and the citizens will decide that. So if the next season comes up and 2 organizations say they're doing exactly the same thing, then the citizens decide, well, we're going to vote for that one, or both of them, or none of them. So it's kind of the citizens steering it. So then the citizens decide what organs make up our metahuman for the next season. And then the commons itself is the heart that distributes out resources to all the different organs for the next season. Right. So the citizens say these are the 12 commons dues, but they don't assign a budget for them. They just say these are the 12 organs. I eventually want the citizens to assign a budget, maybe, but maybe we don't do that. Again, we'll require a vote for us to make that change. But that's the main work of the commons, just to keep reiterating, is after that MetaHumans formed, all the groups came in, they just watched the roundtable, they were part of the discussions on what's important. Then they sit together in a council of, however many people represent all the different dues, so 2 from each. So right now it's like 14 people or whatever. They will then be the ones that have the vote on how we actually distribute a budget amongst the organizations. So that's the real bulk of the work of the commons. And that might take a few days after the roundtable, and maybe we even set it that we have, a 3-day period to discuss it. We set our budget and we get going. So we give like an entire week and just say 1 week every 3 months is when the commons, gets together. And this is similar to state democracies now. And I think it's great where they have representatives. They come together like once every period. They do all the decision making, and then they all have other jobs. So they go back and do their other jobs for a while. I think that's a very cool model that we can emulate a little bit here, where again, once every 3 months, the commons comes together, kind of help steer a little bit, and then they go back to their other organizations to do the operations, which is how they're getting paid. Does that make sense?
Totally. And yeah, I think early on in some of the commons design docs, there's that kind of thread around, do we do proposal-based funding? Do we do distributive funding, based off of percentages that just flows kind of naturally? And where do the citizens come into play? Because right now, the citizens just has the power to put people in the commons or take them away, but not necessarily assign those budgets. And I think moving towards a blend eventually, while keeping that as simple as possible, allows for the kind of high fidelity decision making of the people who are most involved in the system in those DHOs to really put a premium on what they think is valuable, but also allowing citizen input to shape kind of another portion of funding or another portion of kind of percentage flow. I could see being more democratic in a sense, or even integrating something like the Gitcoin quadratic funding, where every season there's kind of a matching fund that is put there by Commons resources, and citizens can donate as well if they want, or they get, this is the same sort of thing with the proposals for kind of donation dollars to be given to citizens of a nation state to put forward for ad campaigns. But instead of advertising campaigns, we're talking about budgets. So if every citizen got 100 seeds to give away every season to their favorite DHOs, and that can get matched by other working group funds, you have a
I
chance
love that.
really get a
My
yeah. So there's a lot of possibility there. I think I'm really excited to see if between now and Regen Roundtable in March, we can get to the point where there's that clear sense of presentation about what's been done, what are the needs that aren't being filled right now, that we'd like certain DHOs or yet to be formed DHOs to step up and fill, and then a clear way for providing funding. And I think right now we're still in this kind of limbo state where the seed sale contract is still being transferred from a HIFA account into some sort of Commons account. And so once that becomes real, I think it'll put a lot of fire under people to set up for moving that.
I would say let's treat it as real as it is right now, because HIFA is going to send over the HUSD once we're ready. So if we're ready now, then we'll just send the HUSD. Like, yeah, we'll transfer the contract. There's just we've been doing that. But let's right now just treat it as it is already done, because it is essentially done at that point.
Cool. I'm good with that.
Well, that's what I say we do, and maybe we have the kickoff, the roundtable, and we just do that, and that might be the moment we actually send it over. So after we do this next vote, and we do the proper roundtable, right after that moment, HIFA will look back and send all of the HUSD of value that we've earned over the last however long since the referendum passed, and send that to the Seeds Commons as a start.
Cool.
I think that's, again, these are all my opinions on how it should go. And I'm just trying to offer this. It's the same way when a new do sets up. You say we have a benevolent dictator, and I actually think this is a healthy pattern. Set a benevolent dictator to do the original structure to kind of get the gears turning, and then remove that role and pass it over to something else and have a better governance structure. I think the Seeds Commons kind of needs that, because I see it being stuck in a stalemate. So all I'm offering right now is just a very opinionated view of like how we can get started with it, of course, having the ability to evolve after that and just being real simple. So what I would suggest is doing the roundtable, having the organizations come, send over the HUSD from HIFA, and then just use a percentage base. Let's distribute all of these funds, and they're going to be run out anyway. But then all that the Commons members are doing is they're taking 100% and they're just deciding how to split that 100% amongst all the existing organizations. And then when they decide to send that money, it's up to that organization what to do with their money. And that's it. And if we want to have something that's like a discretionary budget throughout the seed cycle that people can, propose requests or contributions individually to something, I would say that that needs to be a separate due. And we call it a separate due. We call it the Seeds discretionary budget due. And then the citizens can vote that in if they think it's valuable, and then it's a group of, however many people are part of that due, and their whole entire role, and they're being paid for this by that due, is to evaluate different quests that are coming in from the community. But we don't do this in the Commons, and we don't expect Commons members to be, doing due diligence on proposals and quests, because they're not going to have the time to do that. And that's just, it's not going to work well. So instead, you might have a separate organization where 3 individuals, that's literally their role. They're getting paid to do due diligence on proposals, and all proposals for the whole Seeds ecosystem can come to that. And how much they have is set by the Seeds Commons. The Commons will say, hey, we'll give 20% to this. Maybe it starts off with 2% because it's an experiment. And then after that season, like, holy crap, the value that came out of this was incredible. Let's give them 30% next season. But that's how I see it, is any operations that are happening, anything that's taking your time and you have to come in there every single week or whatever the case is, if you're doing work, it exists in one of the organs of the Commons organizations. And that's the same way if you want to contribute. Like, if you want to contribute to it, you don't contribute through the Commons, you contribute through one of the organizations that are representing the Commons. And if we ever see a gap where there's energy wanting to come in, that's an opportunity for a new organization to form, to capture that energy and direct it. But I don't think the commons should be trying to capture any of that energy because it's just going to overwhelm people. And again, it's what Haifa tried to do from the start. We failed at doing that. Let's not repeat that pattern.
Mhm. Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does.
Yeah, strong opinions here, but it's just,
Yeah. It does. I think last thing I think I'll say, and then I'd be really excited to move towards bottlenecks and multi-year timeline stuff. In Samara, we've been on a pretty deep journey of really learning what it means to DHO, and all the different forms that can take, and all the different kind of generations of people that come in at different periods of time with different understandings of what they want to be doing and how they want to be doing that. And that, for our organization, we've explicitly taken a pretty, you might call it philosophical approach, or you might call it, I use different language, maybe like a true heart-centered approach or evolutionary approach of really holding some integrity to kind of the highest ideals of how I'd like to see a regenerative group of people, a heart-centered group of people organize. And that means that when there's moves towards simplicity, those moves can also often be seen as moves towards reductionism that cause some sort of harm. And so there's been, a lot of length and spaciousness in what we've done in Samara. That means initial visions of what we might be delivering in month 1 look totally different in month 12, looking back and saying, yeah, we kind of delivered some of that, but what we're really seeing ourselves delivering right now is totally different than that. There's some common threads, but there's a lot of value being created here that we did not ever understand we could create. And so we've taken a very particular approach through DHOing. I think something like DHO Tell has a much more kind of clear, concrete vision of, hey, we want to story tell. We want to be able to share the mission seeds with the world. We want to be able to share the story of the regenerative renaissance. And we want to set up structures that can do that as kind of quickly and effectively as possible, while learning what it means to DHO. But the purpose of that DHO isn't to necessarily learn what it means to DHO.
Sure.
And so some are going to be able to come together, I think, and come for a season and say, hey, this is what we're going to do, and do it. Although I think many will get to that point that we got to in Samara, where they'll realize that in order to really do what they say they're setting out to do, there's going to be some evolution and changes in there. And so a proposal coming on the first of the season will look, I don't know, I have faith that in some groups it'll really turn out clearly that group was able to organize into a functioning DHO and deliver, and others will get to the point where after those 3 months, they'll look entirely different. But that learning is still incredibly valuable for the system. And so finding ways for the commons and the citizens to recognize both the value of kind of services delivered and lessons learned is going to be an interesting challenge, I think.
So I'm going to apply a complementary perspective that they're the same thing. So this is what I would suggest, complementary on what Samara could present. So Samara, some OKRs for the next season is we're going to help organizations be part of the Seeds Commons. So the next season, they could actually look back and be like, look, we helped permaculture do tell and movement of movements actually set up their do. You did. I don't know if you did or not. Or we helped these organizations actually consider being an effective do and what that actually means. We helped them get set up. So that's some clear work and contribution that Samara is bringing or could be bringing. Second is we were exploring how to do a do. And we took all of this knowledge and wisdom and we updated some of these open libraries. We put up some new do templates on how to actually set up your basic do. We have some role templates, etc. So all the learning is actionable value being added to the system and providing different templates and strategies if that's happening. So this is some things I think would be very practical that Samara could bring up as we're helping organizations join or helping organizations find their purpose. And these are organizations that are serving seeds in different capacities. We're helping them be more effective. We're also providing all these templates for how to do a do. So that's what I would say that, Samara could bring and is very clear and tangible value being added to the ecosystem. That before we had this knowledge base, it wasn't being captured. I know there's so much wisdom that Samara has been playing with the last few years. I don't know where it is. I don't know how to take advantage of that. I don't know how to use that. And probably most other groups don't either. So the value of actually going through that process, templatizing it, putting it into a clear strategy and making it usable is incredibly valuable. And I think that's just a micro step away from what you're doing anyway, or you're already doing that. In which case, I think, that's something that Samara could bring to the commons and present each season, or whatever seasons, Samara is coming together to contribute. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Was that even remotely related to what you're saying?
It's related. I think maybe the clearest point that I was feeling around that is the challenge of someone who sees something in the seeds ecosystem right now that they see as a huge gap, and they want to fill that gap, and they want support filling that gap, and going through the process of trying to establish an organization around that with all the questions around governance and contribution accounting and coordination and communication may not be the most direct way to fill that gap and to be of service in the system. And so maybe this is what you're talking about with that DHO that's there to help individuals just do individual projects. And they have some allocation of funding to say, hey, this is an open, access proposals. You have a project you want to do in the seeds ecosystem, we're here to help you execute those projects and get funding if you need those projects.
Well, in every capacity. So every DO, well, a lot of DOs will have that open proposal process, depending on the DOs, but several of them will. And they all have different areas where they're serving. So if you want to serve seeds and help build some of the tools, come to HIFA, make a proposal and help build some of the tools through HIFA. If you want to help with movement building, cool, DO already exists, or moving to movements, depending on which one you want to be a part of, and make your individual proposals there. Right. So don't make your individual proposals to the Seeds Commons, make them to the organs within Seeds that are doing that. And then they would have their own process for how to join them. And, kind of coming full circle, this is what I want our knowledge base to serve as. And we might even have like a clear, organ descriptor that they'll have here. So, like technology, movement building, storytelling, etc. Just make it real simple for folks. But then they get to click on here and how to contribute. So all of those quest ideas, individual contributions go through organs. And if we need a generic one, again, here's an opportunity for us to have a, seeds quest do. And it's just a do set up just to do quests and seeds. Or one of these dudes take that on and say, yep, we want to do it too, whoever it is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Does that make
Yeah.
Again, very strong opinions here, and I keep saying that just because this is how I see it, and I would love for us to crystallize on something, even if it's not perfect, and just try it out and iterate. Because if we get stuck in the idea of just trying to ideate beforehand without trying it out, then we might not ever get started. So that's kind of my intention.
Yeah, and hearing the kind of your desire for funds that have been collecting from the seed sale to be really put in the commons for this since the referendum of enacting the Seeds Commons, that has felt vague to me. I don't know that there's been a clear commitment from HIFA to do that, and so hearing you want to do that is nice. And I think,
for what it's worth, I did write a comment forever ago saying this, but anyway, comments anyway, so there was a clear commitment at some point. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it.
But yeah, I think, looking at the suite of DHOs we have, Samara doesn't have any money right now. I don't think, DHO has any money. I don't know the situation of other things. And so for the capacity right now for us to do what you're saying isn't quite there. And I totally want to work towards getting there. I'm just looking at current state, and I think others are, and seeing the gaps and the fact that there is some funding available, and the fact that the March for Gen Roundtable is coming up as a moment where that could really be activated, I think is an exciting place we could move towards, where, hitting March running, there's a clear structure for people to come in and apply their gifts to what they see as needed through the various DHOs.
Well, and then continue to provide my opinions. Come March, we're supposed to have the Duke tool ready as well, so that each one of these commons dues can set up their own organization, start issuing their own tokens. And I think each organization ought to have their own tokens, in my opinion, or they don't necessarily need to. And then these tokens also represent the Seeds holdings. So every one of these organizations, I think, already have an alliance share. So when they're issuing tokens for work done, they can use some of the, the working capital dollars to do contributions, but they can do also what HIFA did, which is then issuing Renaissance Explorer tokens that are backed by the Seeds Alliance that Renaissance Explorers got. So we can start issuing value immediately. And the other thing I see the commons doing is, if we have all of these organizations represented in the commons, movement building, organizations to help organizations set up DAOs, like we have all of this organizing capacity, we can take the commons then and go to any layer one and say, hey, we want to bring our entire ecosystem and integrate with this layer one. If you fund us to do that, we have all of this capacity behind us. You know, we can even do some marketing and movement building for your layer one. We can, etc. So there's a lot of different value we could add. And then the commons could also approach different layer ones for funding. Same way we're going with Git grants, and we might interoperate with Ethereum because of that. And there's a lot of, you know, value to be had there. So I see the seeds commons also being that coordination capacity. However, all the work involved with doing that, I think, needs to go through a DHO. So here's another opportunity for an organ to be like, hey, we are the fundraising organ. Our entire role is to go out there and can you hear that? Go away. Someone's trying to call me. Anyway, I don't know where that's coming from, so bear with me for a second.
Unless it's me.
Oh, it's you. Okay.
I don't think so.
No, it's probably me. All right, it's
Okay.
gone. Right, so then I could see the seeds commons going out there and reaching and getting other funding. But the other thing is the institutional funding, I also think can go through the commons. Is when we approach institutions that are focused on systems change and they don't know how to, they've got $1 billion budget or whatever, and they don't know how to distribute it effectively. They don't want to give it to charities because so much of money going to charities isn't effective. Like if we can prove a more effective model of taking that value, distributing it out to decentralized organizations who are then being able to manage individual contributions on the ground, et cetera, and we create that model, then I think we can bring a lot more energy and value through it. So I think that's kind of, if we're getting into multi-year timeline, this is what I see us doing, is we're creating the foundation and coordination structure to be able to scale infinitely towards systems change. And we need to figure out those patterns. And that's the real value that we're providing here, is figuring out those organizing patterns and building the structure. Yes, I think that could be the exploration, and launching these multi-currencies, I think, would be huge for the commons. Because if we can take it, and I would personally put my life savings into this. Any dollar that I have in dollars right now, I would much rather put it into a constant dollar that's paying me, 7% and covering inflation. And then I know the additional percentage is going to fund the commons and doing good things in the world. That's just a no-brainer for me, and I assume it will be for others. So having that capacity in the commons too, I think, is a real quick way to get additional funds. So I think we have a lot of capacity to bring energy and additional revenue into the commons, but we need to figure out how we're distributing those funds to the other organs before that's even necessary. So that's the work I see we're doing right now, is creating that organizing pattern. So I'll pause there.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I think being able to see all the seeds and the commons as the entity where the kind of experimentation with public goods allocation is occurring is what many people out there in the funding world are interested in. And so, Gitcoin is just one community that does that. But I think the more that commons DHOs can really think in that terminology and identify what are the public services, public goods they're providing to this, if we're talking civilizational scale, to this experiment in civilization design. Thinking and maybe going beyond just, I'm not a public goods expert, but even using terminology more explicitly around civilizational goods gets beyond perhaps the notion of a specific body of the nation or the community or the state, and can look at the fact that it transcends the kind of geographic or bureaucratic and into the cultural as well. And so, someone providing cultural services or information ecosystem cleaning that transcends nation boundaries or community boundaries. You're talking about internet curation. You're talking about the cleansing of kind of bad information and the empowering of people to really understand what they're reading, what they're listening, what they're watching. That's civilizational scale service. And so I'm a big fan of the Consilience Project. So that's kind of their wheelhouse, but it helps provide this lens of all the different layers of services that go beyond just the technological layer that we have in Seeds, the communication layer we have with Discord and all the different websites and tools, and into the social, into the relational, into the cultural, and into the educational. Really seeing that we're on an evolutionary learning journey here together, and that needs a lot of librarians, that needs a lot of janitors, that needs a lot of teachers, that needs a lot of kids acting out in class to kind of question the teacher too. So just think about civilization goods.
Well, so you mentioned Gitcoins, which I think is cool. So Gitcoins is a model that you can vote with your dollars or vote with your money in order to impact social goods. I think it's awesome, and there's a lot we can mirror there. But I think what we're doing with Seeds in the Commons is really cool too. And that's, you get to support the Commons by buying a seed, right? So all of the seeds that you buy from the Commons is working capital direct to the Commons. So this is supporting everything the Commons is doing. And what the Commons is doing is also making those seeds more valuable. So instead of donating to an institution or charity or whatever to impact the positive change you want to see in the world, now you can actually kind of invest and get some seeds back. And the Commons work is building a new civilization in which the seed is more valuable. So they're actually doing work to then go and make that currency that you're buying, that token of appreciation for helping support the Commons work, more valuable and more useful. So I think that flywheel effect could actually generate a lot of revenue for the Commons once it starts feeding back on itself. So I think there's a lot of potential here to kind of re-engineer how we fund systems change, where it isn't a donation anymore. It's an investment into a new civilization. And this is also what I think will attract a lot more organizations to the Commons, because way too much freaking time of change-making organizations is spent chasing grants, making their work applicable to investors and financiers in the old world system. So a lot of like the radical change they set out to do, they actually tapered back tremendously so that they can get funding so they could eat. So it's not an effective way to do systems change. So if we could have a different vehicle that could fund the radical change that we need, in a way that's collaborative, so they don't have to spend a lot of time focused on the Commons anymore. They can focus on their piece that they're bringing to the whole, and then let the groups that are focused on, pushing the seed cell forward or going out there and getting grants. There's separate groups doing that are pulling off that work, so that all the change-making organizations can stop focusing on grant making and instead focus on systems change. And again, if we could start doing this a little bit, it'll have a compounding effect, because then they could be more effective, which will move things forward quicker, which will then feed back into the ecosystem, help it grow. More people are, yeah, exactly, you see it. So I'll pause there and see if we're seeing it similar and what you think.
No, I think we're definitely seeing it similar. What if we take a big deep breath, let go of the designs in the future, and maybe get back into the present around what you mentioned with bottlenecks? I'd be curious to hear what's been on your mind with that.
Super practically, I have like 80 messages on LinkedIn, 50 on Discord, and a lot of people are just reaching out to me to partner, ally, and move things forward because they see my face and they don't know who else to reach out to. So I think that's also something massively necessary, and it's already happening with Samara and the different organs that, come this Renaissance Roundtable and transition, there's people that I know I could send all of this energy to, and it could be held and captured and moved forward. And there's a lot of potential there. People that, are representing different funds that want to invest into this. They just need someone to talk to and a place to actually make that investment, which I think should be into the Commons itself, through buying seeds from the Commons. So that's kind of the big bottleneck I'm seeing, and I want to test, and I have to. I'm about to be a father, so which is why you've been seeing me just go like ridiculously intense these last couple months, because I'm trying to like get it set up so that I could walk away, and I want to walk away. I think that's necessary. Radical honesty, one of my recent mushroom trips that was part of the wisdom and inspiration, is like, okay, you actually need to step away because you're setting up old step away for a period, because it's setting up old patterns that people are used to, looking for a leader or looking for a founder or looking for a source of information. And just because I've been doing all the maps and playing that role, a lot of it's landing on me, and I don't think that's healthy, because I'm not. constantly trying to, change this perspective with words, but I think it needs a little bit more than that. So I'm planning on actually taking off the next season. I'll be back in the fall season to focus on, welcoming a new life into this world. So before I do that, I was wanting to build the knowledge base, which I just right before this call made a video of, to get rid of a knowledge bottleneck, because right now, like, people didn't know where to find information. So they were just confused. They didn't know where to find official information versus a bunch of the opinions that are everywhere. So I'll just super quick share with you what I did there. So this is an attempt at doing that. So we only have 4 citizen governed spaces, Constitution, the guide itself, all the different currencies, and our brand and logos. So it's the only spaces that require, at least in my opinion, because again, all of this is a work in progress, that require citizens voting to make a change for it. Then we have these badge governed spaces. So this is a badge within the commons. If you hold that badge, you can make changes to this. And these are different opinionated guides. So the citizens guide, this is, let's click on this. This is to make it real simple for citizens. They're showing up, they're like, cool, how do I participate? This is just a real simple guide that's saying, hey, these are the different ways you show up in the world. All right. Analos, I think, is going to help tremendously with that and providing some videos and stuff. Economic roadmap, pause. Yes, go.
Can I ask a quick question?
Of course.
And this may head into feedback depending on the answer to the question. So the badge governed ones, do those badges already exist?
No. Okay. So those badges I want to exist in the Seeds Commons do, and then voted in by the Seeds Commons members.
Cool. Can I share a piece of feedback on how you might move towards this unbottlenecking in a more helpful?
Stop doing things that aren't available yet. Sorry, go. Yeah.
No, keep putting suggestions out there for what should be available, but make it clear that they're not yet available. Because I think a lot of confusion occurs inside me and others when we see something and we think, oh, okay, that thing's a thing. And then we go to find that thing and we can't find it. And there's not a clear distinction between things that already exist and things that are proposed, or things that are in the works. And so maybe those 3 layers of existing, kind of decided but in implementation, and proposed could help provide just a general kind of landscape of clarity around all that's happening in seeds, because oftentimes I know people encounter what they think is reality and they realize it's just kind of a vision.
Right. Let me, I'll just tell you how I'm operating, because that might be helpful. I am creating things for a period of time in the future. So everything that's present in the knowledge base is what I'm expecting to be the case come March, when I'm expecting to release this and say it's ready. So when I'm ever doing my guides, I always say it's for this period, because otherwise you go back and you have to change, where you say this part isn't ready, So I'm making this all ready for that March moment when we release the do, and then we have the commons to do it. But I love that feedback, and I'm wondering if there's an effective way to, signal what's not ready yet. Maybe I put it in italics and we start off, and if it's in italics, it's, in the works. Yeah, if you have a suggestion on how I can make that clear without it requiring additional work in the future to go back and undo that, or you forget about it and then you say something's not ready when it is, and it's like I couldn't find the balance there. So,
right. Yeah. I hear that challenge.
So if you have the suggestion, I'm all ears on how to better do that.
Yeah.
But anyway, so coming back to this is what I thought was a big bottleneck. It was a knowledge bottleneck of where do we find all the resources? Because you're saying, where do we find all that? So if it's highlighted, there's a link to it, it exists, it's real, it's here. If it's saying to be CC, to be co-created, it means it's suggested. And the only thing I believe that's that way right now is this badge governed thing. Otherwise, everything exists. There's links to it. It shows you how to do it, and it's kind of here and ready to go. Yeah, so this is one bottleneck, is having one source of information to reference, one source of facts to reference with the citizen governed stuff, and one source of all the different guides and how to participate. One source to come to see what dues are active, what the dues are offering, and how to participate in those dues or organizations, and kind of, holding in one space from the knowledge side. So this is why I've been putting all my energy here, so that when I do step away, I'm not a bottleneck anymore of where do we find information. It needs to be found here without it just sitting in my Google Drive or something and me knowing where it's at, which was the case before, doing something like this. Now, this is my perspective, because I've been spending the time doing this so far, and not very many people have contributed to this guide yet. But I know a lot more need to, and then this is probably going to get a lot bigger. Hopefully not too much bigger, because it'll get overwhelming, of the different leaks for the things other groups have been doing. So I encourage you, and then please, I think all the Seeds Commons links might watch this. If you do, please add your information here before I do any video overviews and before I share this as it, hey, it's ready now. I want to make sure we have all the wisdom captured. That's my invitation for you too, to look at this. And I made a 9-minute overview I'm about to share literally right before our call, that we can go through and see if there's any major gaps or what we might need to add here. So that's one bottleneck I wanted to get rid of, is the knowledge one, and the operational bottleneck. So again, people coming to me and saying, hey, I want to participate in seeds in all these different ways. Like, that's an ineffective pattern. So the operational bottleneck would be solved here with people going, yep, I want to participate with marketing. I know I go approach the Do Tell team. I click on that and there's a clear way to contribute, and I know who to contact in Do Tell. And let me show you that real quick. That's what I want to be linked literally here. So we can go to Haifa, we go to how to contribute, and Haifa has its whole handbook that's very detailed, as you probably know, that says how to contribute to Haifa and kind of walks through the entire process. We probably need a simple one that's like, reach out to these people for these areas. And that's what I recommend, each do, so that we're not having any bottlenecks of people who are just very present out there in the world. Myself and other people who are making videos, that everyone thinks they need to reach out to them. They can instead find the place of who to reach out to contribute. So that's some of the bottlenecks I felt like we needed to break down. And the other one I wanted to break down is the one in the comments itself, with them trying to do operations. That's going to create another massive bottleneck where everything's going to try to filter through the commons, and then that's going to break it. Instead, I want everything to filter up through all the organizations, and the commons are just the coordinating tool. Like, give them a budget and then kind of step away and let the organizations do what they need to do. So it's kind of a bottom up operation process rather than a top down bottleneck process. If that makes sense. So anyway, 3 different bottlenecks I'm considering. I'll pass it to you and see what your thoughts and.
Yeah, I know Sydney's been floating the idea of having some sort of communication intake form that might serve as a way to just make all those requests that seem like a lot of them are coming to you more transparent to the system. And so that,
what it's worth, I assume there's others coming to other people, and I'm just assuming there's other bottlenecks as well. I only see my world, obviously. I don't think I'm the only one. In fact, I know I'm not. Other people have also mentioned this, but anyway, yeah.
For sure. Yeah, but yeah, and I see it, it's bordering on that distinction of, I think right now, Sydney's recommendations, that becomes kind of like a commons, operational information board. But if there's an opportunity for DHO to take on that sort of communication intake and just making that transparent to the world of commons DHOs in the seed system, then you have the ability for anyone to respond to what's relevant to them.
That could be, if there's one other thing the commons is doing in my world, it would be, and I've heard another term for it, it's called the wall of wonder, or wow. And this could just be an open board, maybe it's a mirror board or whatever, that's run by people in the commons, and it's anyone who's a member there can just put up little post-it notes of things they think would be valuable. So when other organizations are looking what they can contribute next season, or new organizations are coming up and saying, hey, how can I be part of the commons too? They can actually go to this wall and get inspired, being like, oh, these are things that the ecosystem's actually requesting. And then that's the only thing the commons is doing, is they just put up a post-it note being like, yep, this will be cool if we had this. And then they walk away. They don't try to set up a working group to actually accomplish it. They put it up there and say, this is necessary. And then that's an opportunity for any of the organizations within Seeds to be like, ooh, we're going to take that on. And that could be our, offering for the next season.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure.
Because then that's what the commons is doing, is that it's a top-down informing process. They're creating the wisdom, but it's not a top-down operations process, which again will create a bottleneck. So they're informing what might need to be done, and then actually doing it is a bottom-up process through all the different organs, which will then help us scale infinitely, because we're not having one organization trying to do it all. We have infinite organizations trying to do it, and we just have one coordinating hub. which is just how do we distribute our budget? And that happens again once every week, or once a week every 3 months or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. I like the wow.
Yeah.
I know kind of, land-based projects that have done that, where they'll have a physical board. And often, I was helping out this project in Guatemala for 3 months, and they have volunteers coming through all the time with all these great ideas, but the core team there doesn't have the capacity to carry through on all these beautiful ideas. And it can be this kind of painful process of hearing so many beautiful things that you don't have the capacity to do. But if you have those documented, and then you have a volunteer show up and they're there for a committed period of time and they can do something, or when they have the resources for more staff, there's kind of a clear sense of what's beautiful to do. So I like the idea of that in our space. Can I ask you?
The other thing is to reduce overwhelm, because us trying to do everything at the same time and holding on to all pieces at the same time, it's breaking us down. So that's another purpose of the knowledge base, is that we could capture it. We feel like we don't have to hold it in our brains anymore. We put it somewhere, we can let it go and focus on the actual work we're doing in the process. And then we know we can get to that and we'll prioritize it later, or let other organizations find out what they want to prioritize based on this wall, if they even need to experience the wall. Or yeah, you get it.
Can I ask you a non-seeds question? Kind of personal preparing? Yeah. How's preparing to be a father?
Oh man, I'm in love. Been really connecting with CC2. Every day we go for a hike. So for the last almost 3 months now, every single day we've gone up and spent 2 to 3 hours in the canyon and drinking spring water, breathing fresh air, doing a lot of Reiki with the new baby to be born. And it's just been magical. I've had several dreams with the baby, with him showing up and seeing him when he's older. One dream was just so profound to me and I loved it. And it was like me kind of being his secretary. And the whole feeling was like, what I've been doing and kind of my life work up until this point was composting, essentially. Like I was born in America, so I've got a lot of programming. Everyone does, but I've got a lot of old cultural conditioning that I still had to work through, and a lot of biases that just aren't serving me, that are causing me to not actually see what the future civilization could be as clearly. And the whole dream was like, they actually have that blueprint much clearer. And my role rather, is to support them in making that real form. And this comes back to the start of this, which is like cathedral building. Like this regenerative civilization isn't entirely for me, even though I'm wanting it. I'm going to be living in a regenerative village, hopefully sooner rather than later, raising my kids there, which is also my focus on regenerative civics. Is I started this whole journey a decade ago with intentional communities, eco-villages, permaculture. Like I kind of fell off that, working on how do we coordinate at scale and build new economic and governance systems. Great. But now it's time to like wrap back around and get back to the real core of this, which is physical land-based regeneration and living in, yeah, you get it. So that's also where that came alive, is once my baby was coming, it's like, okay, I've been on like a 6-year hiatus and in one way, kind of, because I started off, that was my main focus a decade ago. It's we're going to have a village, we're going to set it up, we're going to have all these people that we can then raise kids together with, and create a new way of life, awesome. And then that hasn't happened yet. So that's been the reemergence of that desire for me with my kid coming, is like, cool, well, we want this for the next couple of years so that we're not being those weird parents who the kid only interacts with us because the rest of the culture is too harmful for him or whatever. So that's all really alive for me. And yeah.
Beautiful. Well, yeah, I really want you to enjoy that time and that focus away. And I'm sure you will, but I'm really excited for you and CC.
There's no way. I mean, I'm only saying I'll step out in the official role, but I'm going to be spending still time with Regen Civics during that off time, whatever that means, to help coordinate those and get those going, because there's a lot of groups that are ready to go now and that energy's there. And what do you think about all that?
Yeah, I remember I spent a good year or so kind of in my learning journey that found me towards seeds, diving deep into systems thinking and discussions of collapse, and getting into the whole regenerative movement, and lots of reading, lots of podcasts, lots of videos. And I remember one, I think it was a Stoa session with Nora Bateson, and it was her, Benita Roy, and the one other, Rhea Beck. And it was these kind of three brilliant systems thinking ladies. And the question, one of my favorite videos I've watched in that learning journey, and the question came up around, the classic question, like, what's highest leverage in the system that we're all trying to change? Like, what's the point of highest leverage, Miss Systems Thinker? Tell me where it is. And there was this kind of deep consensus among the three of them that it's really right at home with their kids that they're raising, and kind of how fresh and how powerful that uncultured state is, to go out and then shape culture and be culture as that child grows up, and how precious of an opportunity that is as a parent to know that every day, you're not just giving love to this being that you've brought into the world, but as someone who cares about all these social issues, perhaps the highest leverage point in that whole entire system is kind of sleeping there right next to you in bed, and just right down the hallway, crying at you because you didn't give them sugary Fruit Loops, or whatever it is. But I think
don't give them sugar, because then you're getting into crack addicts.
Yeah.
Even now, since I stopped eating white sugar for so long, like if I have some on accident, I feel it and it's intense. And I'll 99% of the time, Cece and I get in fights whenever we both eat it. It's terrible. And then I'm thinking, this is less sugar than we're feeding kids who have a much smaller body and a much more reactive metabolism. Like, no wonder kids are running around screaming and like being little hellions. Like, we're literally giving them crack and they're like running around and reacting to that. And we're saying, kids are just meant to be hellions. It's like, well, no, I don't think that's true. And anyway, that's a whole other conversation. Well, I wanted to add to that with what I think is a complementary high leverage place to show up is in the village. So that's also been my focus on Regen Civics is I think we've got in my opinion, I think we've got as far as we can in organization and systems thinking with our current culture. And our current culture within Seeds is diverse groups all across the globe kind of coming together and, trying to synchronize. I think what we can benefit a lot from now is building physical villages where we're coming together in community and we're doing some of that deep systems thinking, that deep change work. So being able to come together and do a collective fast and do a collective reimagining process. And then from that space, start designing the protocols that are going to help us get there. I think the intelligence of the design that come out of that container is going to be way better than what we've been doing up until now. So that's why I think the kind of the highest leverage in my world right now for systems change is physical communities where we're coming together and experiencing a different way of social organization, sharing the wins, templatizing them and sharing them out there and helping others do the same. So that's why I thought Regen Civics is probably the highest leverage place for me to continue to show up right now. It's very practical systems change. And then using that process to inform the protocols we're building. Because up until now, it has been I think it's been very inspiration driven. And most of the protocols I see have come from people who are like, hey, I was doing a mushroom journey. I got this really clear idea. I was able to capture and articulate it. It feels really inspired. That I think that only works up until the point until it's inspired and experienced and, practiced and then captured and templatized. So that's kind of how I'm seeing the high impact. And then it pairs with what those ladies of systems change are speaking about, which is when we get villages and then we have our kids collectively growing up in them and we're learning from them. And I even want to start a series where like asking kids these seemingly basic questions, like what is value? What is success, and try to see what their answers are and, let that inform our work going forward and letting a new culture of kids who are working together in this environment kind of create new realities and seeing what happens out of that process. And again, templatizing and sharing it. So that's kind of where I'm seeing is a high leverage point for change going forward. Pause there.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Yeah. Well, it's time for Samara Trust's practicing call on Wednesdays. So
It hasn't been an hour and a half.
I believe so, yeah. Um, yeah, thank you for this. It was great to hear not just your opinions, but really your excitement around so many things, and just grateful for all that excitement that you've shared with others and brought others into. Um, and yeah, really wish you the best as you're welcoming a new member of your family. And there's a long road ahead for all this, so don't feel the need to rush back.
Thank you. And I so deeply appreciate the way you showed up to hold space and continually to hold it. And I've seen like, I want to just give you deep gratitude for how you've held some really tense spaces and conversations, and just it almost seemed like it just flows through you, or it doesn't even impact you. Just like, oh, and you just respond with love and ground it and transmute it. So I'm only stepping away from seeds for this next season because I have so much trust and confidence that it'll be better for seeds for me to do so. Well, maybe up until this point, I've had this fear that if I stepped away, it would actually be harmful and it would cause more harm than good. But I feel like there's so many incredible people who haven't been able to step into like their full positions of authority here and full leadership because of maybe the gravity I've been holding. Some people have given me that feedback I feel might be true. And I have nothing but so much confidence that if I step away and these other people are able to get empowered, it's going to be just a net positive for the whole ecosystem and just so good. And I see you as being one of those folks to be able to hold this space and kind of, maintain some coherence as we move forward. And to make sure we don't fall off into short-termism. So you mentioned, multi-year timeline. That's so important and incredible. I'd love to do a separate call exploring what you think about that. I know you have to leave here, so let me just finish up appreciating you. But I'm so confident that if, I did step away, that it wouldn't succumb to that. It wouldn't succumb to both short-termism or exaggerated long-term thinking where we didn't get anything done, which I think are the two, possibilities to exist when you have these vacuums. I say a vacuum because it's the space that I've been holding, and yeah, I'd love for you to hold that, and for all the Seeds Commons groups to hold that. I just really appreciated how you've been showing up so far, and thank you. And my baby boy thanks you too, because I wouldn't have stepped away if I didn't feel this way. And I know you and so many other incredible humans in this are all giving me the confidence to be like, cool, this is held and this is just going to work so well. And yeah, thank you.
Yeah, you come back when he starts being a brat and he's tired of you.
Oh, that might be several years, I hope.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much, Ricky. Enjoy the hike later today. See you soon.
Cheers, brother. Enjoy.
Cheers.